Good morning, everybody, and welcome to my fourth in the series of Collaborate to Zero. The series is all about how we can collaborate to get to a net positive position, and by interviewing business leaders, thought leaders, and inspirers, the idea is that they can share their tips and their tricks and their learning so that we can all come together and move faster on the journey to getting to net zero. It's been a busy week. Yesterday I had Chantal Nicholson, who is an award-winning chef, and she talked about the restaurant world. This afternoon I have got Richard Dunn, who is an amazing educator. And right now I've got Ali Russell from Extreme E, employee number 2, to tell us all about how mobility and the environment are coming together. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm a wee bit worried about my hairline, but yeah, that's Instagram Live for you.
You're great. It's all about the content.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was just saying that the purest view of Extreme E would be, what on earth are they doing driving around in the most incredible, pristine parts of the world? And having watched and put my hand up and say I kind of had that view to start with, but having watched what you did in Senegal and how you living up to your United Nations framework goal on climate change, which is all about education and awareness, my view changed completely. And what we have needed in the motoring industry is disruption. And you guys are bringing that in spades. So really exciting to talk about this topic today, which is absolutely vital in the drive to getting to a more environmentally focused world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. And I think the point here is climate change is not a new phenomenon. And I think that the problem, and certainly a lot of people we've come across, scientists that are leaders in their field, they've been talking about climate change for the last 20 years. I think the difference is now the seriousness of the situation and the fact that we've got to reimagine that sort of interface. And the BBC did an incredible bit of research 2 years ago where they looked at content across all of the content being produced in the UK, both digital and linear, and found that the top 3 topics were Brexit, which you would have expected, God, which kind of makes sense, but cake was number 3. Not that I have a issue with cake. I actually am quite partial to a wee bit of cake, but I think the point is climate change was down in number 35. So we were surprised by the fact that it's just there's a failure to get dialogue outside of news and outside of documentaries. And so sport has always had the power to bring people together, and I think you can see that with the Euros. I think most people are probably watching the England game tonight, and it brings people together. And I think what I find so exciting is how can we create a sport, and the main purpose of the sport is to highlight climate change, educate people about climate change, and also what can be done, what innovation can be embarked on, and how we can develop that. And companies like yourself are making incredible inroads in terms of you're at the forefront of technology and innovation for the betterment of the planet. And I think that's what we're trying to bring together, that base sort of, let's have more of an understanding, let's have more of a dialogue, and not make that dialogue 100% being talked down to through traditional media, but a two-way dialogue, and being a very progressive brand. So it may seem a bit crazy to be doing motorsport and environmentalism, but I would say that's the genius of it, is we're reaching people that currently aren't being reached, and we're changing the interface and the dialogue. And the last thing I'd just say, Mark, on where we're actually not racing in pristine locations in the middle of nowhere, because unfortunately those pristine locations are under threat. So we actually make a real point of going to these locations that have been, parts of the Amazon that have been burned down, either through climate change, fires, or through deforestation, and we drive in these locations, and then what we try to do in our own way is to put back those locations to their former glory. So we rewild, we repair, and we do what we can do in a very visible way.
That's brilliant. And I think one of the questions I had was legacy, and you guys have a big push on the legacy, as you just said, for the Amazon, and wanted to ask some of the programs you're working on in Senegal. Did you feel that they got it and they really understood why you were there, and they really will carry on with the vision and mission that you delivered?
Yeah, I think what we've tried to do in every location is find an NGO that's very local, that enables us to have a very visible impact in that country. So we worked with a NGO called Oceanum. We actually worked with two. Oceanum were involved in a project to plant over 1 million mangroves on the coast of Senegal. And then we worked with a NGO called Ecozone, which was about, if you look at the world's oceans now, they're littered with plastic. And it was about taking plastics that are washing up on the beaches of Africa and turning them from a litter into something that could be a building material, so that, public facilities could be invested in and built upon, and they could have a second life and upcycling to it. So, the amazing thing is the world is full of locations that are damaged. So we're inundated with opportunities to raise different scenarios around desertification, deforestation, rising sea levels, melting ice caps, melting glaciers, ocean plastic. And what we're trying to do is to find ways and means of fighting back. And it's a tsunami. So we're doing our small bit. But what we're trying to do is to aggregate and get companies like yourselves and fans to also come on this journey with us, and to understand what can be done and how they can be part of that.
A big piece of this is all around collaboration, and how do we collaborate, and how do we partner up with great brands. And being South African, your great big ship, the Centelina, was growing up on the coast. We always knew it and saw it because it was always there. It was a really important thing, carrying mail around the country. And what you've done with that, and I always look under the lid and go, okay, how serious are these people? And the fact that you're using low sulfur diesel, and that you painted the hull with a sulfur-free hull, which doesn't then leach into the ocean, is the level of detail that I think is super critical. But also talking about potentially Ecozone, and the fact that you've got chairs on the ship that are made from recycled water bottles. Those are the kind of collaborations that the world needs. So can you share some of the other collaborations, or can you share the names of the guys that are making the furniture that we can potentially give them a shout out?
Yeah, I think there's so many, Mark, and I think you're absolutely right. There's partnerships with people like Polymateria on the plastic packaging that we've got. I think that technology, it's a spin out from Oxford University, which is some technology which has a best before date. So they recommend that you recycle, but if you don't recycle, it's got a best before, so it biodegrades itself. And so we're going through what's called a time capsule in Senegal at the moment, where we took the rubbish from the event itself, we put it into a time capsule with a GoPro, and in a year's time, we're going back to see what's left. And this packaging biodegrades in under a year. So it's technologies like that. We've got hydrogen fuel cell developer called AFC Energy, another amazing company that's making off-grid power. So we use solar panels, and those solar panels create green hydrogen, and then we use that hydrogen to charge the battery that then charge the cars, and then the only byproduct is water, which we then use to clean the cars. So I think we're in a really good position in terms of, the sort of user cases. And what we try to do is we try to work with companies that have really interesting stories. They're maybe not big multinational companies yet, but they have technology that's really interesting. And what we do is we use the media platform that we've got to help them talk about their story, to help them storytelling, and engage with people.
That's brilliant. I mean, I mean, super disruptive. Are you seeing, I know with McLaren signing on, you get the sense that everybody is now realizing that this is the future. How are you seeing kind of traditional petrol ahead fans shifting across? Do you think that we're getting to a tipping point where people realize that actually sustainability and the future of sustainability is now here?
Yeah, I still think we're in our infancy. I mean, this is very, very new. We are only 2 races in, but I think you've got to start somewhere. And I think what we're seeing is a building, and that's partly because of a need. We've got a really interesting, COP26 is coming up in Glasgow this year, so it's happening in the UK. And we've got the US that is signed back up to the Paris Accord. So you've got a scenario where the world is working together for the benefits of the greater good and the greater society. But I think most importantly, we've just been through a pandemic that we never prepared for, and you see how it's wrecked lives. It's been dramatic. Globally, we're still in the midst of it. And I think what we're seeing is people are starting to think, well, we didn't prepare for a pandemic. What's the next big challenge for the planet around the corner? And that is climate change, and that is a more sustainable future, and that is thought process. So whether that's your what car you use, whether you use a car, whether you holiday locally or whether you go abroad, whether you offset, whether you don't, whether what you do with your cleaning products. I think those are all decisions that we make every single day, and there are alternatives now, and where there aren't alternatives, there's fast becoming alternatives. And I think it's that acceleration and that adoption and actually giving people back the power. And that's what we're looking here, is democratizing motorsports, giving the consumer the power, but the power through educating them on what is the cause, and what are some of the innovations that are out there, and how we can work together more completely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, the power to the people, I think, is everything that we say. We say it's all about every single person has the ability to drive change just by the £1 that they spend, because manufacturers and suppliers always listen to the crowd, and we all have that ability. It sounds like you've got your supply chain, you're working on your supply chain, and that looks incredible. One of the other things that mobility brings, and the innovation and the teams that you're working with, are there any innovations that are coming out of the teams that are then transferable and are able to share with the mobility sector in general?
Well, that's been part of the reason that we started Formula E and then Extreme E, is that motorsport has been incredible. They talk about one season of motorsport is equivalent to 10 years of R&D. And that's the pressure of having to win races, and these manufacturers with their brands on the cars. They want to be seen to have the best. They want to win. They want consumers to go out and buy their product because they associate it with being the best. So the manufacturers coming in means that they have competition against each other, and they have time pressures. And what that does is they innovate much quicker. So what we've done is we've standardized all the vehicles, and the only aspects of the vehicles you can change are the shell, so the shape, which allows them to market, the Cupra or the Hummer, or it more effectively. But what's really important is inside the car they can develop the drivetrain, the electric drivetrain, and the inverter and the software that's related to the car itself. And that allows them to really specifically invest in e-technology and e-mobility. And we certainly, we don't want people investing in the shock absorbers or other aspects of the car, because actually Formula One does a really good job in terms of innovating in those areas. What we want car companies to do is to invest in technology that helps EVs to have batteries that last longer, to have performances that are far better, and actually also to just look cooler. And these are 550 horsepower, cars, they're pretty incredible. And when you put amazing male and female drivers, because that's the other thing that we maybe haven't talked about, but we're very, very progressive in that this is a sport that has, each team has one car, two drivers, one must be male, one must be female. And it's like life. It's very integrated. We borrowed from mixed doubles, the formats. And so what we've got here is something that I think is incredibly progressive, that helps us to, from a social point of view, to make leap forward and to really campaign on equality and to use sport for equality. But at the same time, you know, the North Star is definitely the environment and what we're doing to make the world more sustainable.
I mean, there's just so many things that are pouring out of Extreme E and the kind of the features and the benefits. Your journey to net zero, the idea is to be there by the end of season one. How are you getting on, and how are you going to get there?
Well, I think the most important aspect, Mark, is probably to measure. And we've done a partnership with Ernst & Young, and they help us to really understand what our footprint is. And you alluded to the St. Helena earlier, but the St. Helena is part of that sort of understanding of what a carbon footprint is like for a motorsport series. You know, the biggest footprint comes from logistics, and that in most motorsports is flying the cars from one location to the next to carry on a race. We've sacrificed the number of races we've got. So we only have 5 races. And that is so that we can reach each of these locations using that St. Helena, using that floating paddock. So what we do is we start from a point of measurement and then reducing. So everything we do is looking at reducing. We're not looking at a silver bullet here. We're looking at reducing down as much as possible, but going through pragmatism. We've still got a business to run, and we still have a footprint, and we exist. And if you exist, you have a footprint. After that, what we do is we offset, which I think is just part of, you know, healthy business culture now, is offsetting into a variety of different schemes. And then we become what we call climate positive through our legacy programs. So we do a lot of work in the Red Sea around preserving the green turtle population. It's suffering because the sea level rise is burying the nests, and also the denomination of sex is affected by the temperature of the water. So we need human intervention both to rebury the eggs higher up and also to artificially lower the temperature, which allows a broader male-female population. In Senegal, I talked about what we're doing with the 2 projects there, the Million Mangroves and Ecozone, in terms of dealing with ocean plastic. In Greenland, we very much are working with UNICEF, and that's more of an education. Funnily enough, you can plant trees in the Arctic Circle, but they don't grow very quickly. So where we're driving, there's actually a couple of trees which are up to my desk height now, which they planted in the 1960s. So you can plant trees, it's just the climate is not conducive to those trees growing very, very quickly. So we've majored on education and helping the schools in Greenland to educate on sustainability, but in their own language. So not in English, not in Danish, but in Inuit. And that's been an incredibly successful scheme. And it's not just educating them, it's making sure they know what they can do. Where can they have a voice? How can they influence government, and how can they influence decisions? We then go down to the Amazon and Patagonia, and we've got projects which are renewable projects in terms of renewable energy, but also it's replanting, and we work with the Nature Conservancy to replant mass areas of land which are equivalent to the areas we race on, in terms of reforestation, and also helping farmers make different choices from grazing. So they can move to cacao, which, chocolate is under threat at the moment in terms of massive demand, limited supply. But to mature a crop of cacao takes around about 3 years. And so farmers don't make that conscious decision to move over. because of the time frame that they have no cash coming in. And so what TNC does is they invest with these farmers to make these decisions, and it helps the farmers to make a slightly different choice, but also it means they can pay back because they're economically, you know, wealthier over the long period of time, and they can pay TNC, and so they can invest in more projects. So it's just what we're looking at is how do we have social change and how do we have environmental change in each of the countries. And as I say, there's plenty of opportunities out there. It's just picking the ones that we feel we can do, we can have the best alignment with and the best storytelling with.
I mean, that is super inspiring. So just a question. So it sounds like the projects are already underway in places you haven't even gone to yet. Is the idea then that when you do your race circuit and you come back year 2, year 3, you're going to keep monitoring the environments that you're in and seeing how you've had an impact on the local communities and on the environment?
Absolutely. And things aren't perfect, Mark. So this is not, you know, this is not an exact science. So you're absolutely right. You've got to continually monitor the situations. You've got to evolve and you've got to get better. And it's that continual involvement. And EY has really helped us with a third party pair of eyes in terms of supporting us and really getting those insights that are right for us. And I think we found that really, really helpful, you know, and it allows us to make choices. And what's really good is the more awareness we get, the more companies that approach us to want to get involved with our programs and want to test their technology. And so that's where I think success is in 10 years time, where we're the real focal point for sustainable technology in the marketplace. And some of that's e-mobility and racing and what racing does best, but some of that could be you know, on the marine mobility side of things. Can we make the Saint Helena electric? Is there a potential to do that? What impact will that have? You know, there's plenty of scope for development, both through racing and non-racing formats. And it's funny that AFC that I talked about earlier, they're looking at their technology now for Glastonbury, and can there be zero carbon festivals? Because instead of having diesel generators and, you know, off-grid charging, you've got hydrogen fuel cell that's being used. And it's that sort of thinking. There needs to be proof of concepts, and we've got a pretty good proof of concept because it's extreme, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's hot, it's cold, it's humid, variety of different surfaces, you name it, it's thrown at what we do. And that journey makes it incredibly compelling. And we talk about this being Blue Planet meets, you know, Dakar racing on speed. You know, this is more like 2020 than Test cricket. This is a high sport.
So there are lots and lots of people out there who just don't know where to start. And, you know, they're sitting there shaking their heads going, this is too hard. What's the message to those that really want to try and do something, but don't know where to start?
We're a brand that's about action. So the point is start. We work with the UN on a program called Count Us In, and that follows the UN sustainability goals. And effectively that can start with walking instead of taking the bus or driving, or you know, it's about small differences. That can be about more of a plant-based diet. So, you know, going to Neat Burger as opposed to going to McDonald's. I think the examples I would give is that power to the people. Make a conscious decision to have an impact, and no matter how big or how small that is, have an impact. And when you start from there, it can grow and it can develop. But just start. Because if you start, it's far easier to build upon that and measure. So yeah. Interesting,
because yesterday I had a fascinating conversation with Chantal Nicholson, and my question to her was, what are we doing? What's the advice? And her thing was also action. We don't need words. We need people to actually go out and do stuff. And you've just said the same thing, action, just start and then measure, which which is
Well,
all.
Mark, you've got a wonderful product. You know, there's a lot of competition in your category. You know, people just, when they go down the aisle, they just need to make the right choice, a different choice, a more sustainable choice. And that's what I'm trying to say is in our daily lives, we get numerous opportunities to make a conscious decision and just change one of those. You know, this isn't about becoming perfect overnight. You know, this is about a journey, a journey of discovery on what is more sustainable and how can we all be part of this dialogue. So, you know, you're absolutely right, but it does start with that action, that point of action.
It sounds like, I mean, it is absolutely incredible how young Formula E is and where it's got to so quickly. It's phenomenal. I mean, you've got the biggest names in the traditional world loving what you're doing and participating in what you're doing. You know, chucking it out 3 years. What does that look like, and what would be a massive achievement?
Yeah, for me, I think, you know, changing a sport. I mean, you know, if you look at it, all the matrix would be, you know, your TV numbers, your revenues, you know, that's traditional. For us, it's about social change, and it's becoming more than just a sport. And I think when we get a cross section of society that are following us, and we become more of a movement, that's what success looks like for me. Is that movement having impact, and that impact can be technologies that are developed because we've given them the test bed for technology, or it can be the mass markets that we affect in terms of getting people to think slightly differently and go on their own journey. And that's what I say. Some people are further along the journey, and it's about accelerating the pace of their change. And some people at the start of their journey, and it's about getting them to start that process. And that's really where we're reformatting sport, and we're trying to create a sport that is different, that it culturally stimulates thinking and changes of behavior, both from a consumer point of view, from a business point of view, and from a government point of view.
Brilliant. Well, we're running out of time, so my last two questions you've answered. Maybe unless you've given me lots of names. So I always ask, you know, your favorite sustainability-minded brands. You've given us a list of amazing companies that you're working with, but if there's any brands that you can think of. And the second question is, any inspirational podcasts or books that you would recommend that people look at, listen to, read?
Yeah, well, seeing the size of me, I love hamburgers, and I didn't believe that I could love a plant-based burger until I tried a meat burger. And so what I would say is, one thing is try a meat burger, because they're unbelievably good. I mean, I couldn't believe that it wasn't beef, and so that would be a brand that I would look at. And then I think in terms of inspiration, we've got a very close relationship with Christiana Figueres, who's the lead architect of the Paris Accord. And she does a podcast in terms of outrage and optimism. And if you haven't listened to something, it's great. And she's such an inspirational human being that you know, it won't be wasted time. You'll certainly be stimulated, and it's certainly very thought-provoking.
I couldn't agree more. It's mandatory listening to everybody in my business. They all have to listen to it every Thursday morning. And hopefully the idea of this series is that we're going to put together a compilation of these interviews and present it at COP. And Christiana and all of the Outrage and Optimism team will be there. So hopefully she'll get a copy, or she certainly will get a copy.
Good. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time, Mark, and I wish you all the best with your business. It's having a massive impact, and you know, it's been something that's a go-to brand for us during COVID, but that'll continue long after, and I think it's got an incredibly bright future. So thanks for all the input that you've put in, and the broader input into the industry.
Thanks, Ali. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.